Am I on now? Yes. Fantastic. Right. By the way, I've heard of silent discos, but I've never actually seen a silent video before. That was quite interesting as well, wasn't it? You would expect there to be music with that, but I'm sure we'll sort that out. Welcome, everybody. So we've got a really interesting afternoon here at Track 2, as they're calling it, here at this amazing museum. I was here last night. It's brilliant, and I know it's the brainchild of the mayor, I think, and I know for any of you that are residents in Nîmes, that amphitheatre is just astonishing. I've got to have a proper look at that later on. Okay, let's deal with what we are talking about first, which is the thorny issue, I would call it, of certification for the travel industry. It has been a thorny issue for a while, but today we're going to look at the obstacles and the solutions as to how we can get through this. Now, just to remind you a little bit quickly, just give you a tiny bit of background. And I know that Randy, who I'm going to bring up on stage in a second, is also going to tell us more about this, but the Global Sustainable Tourism Council manages global standards for sustainable travel, known as the GSTC criteria. Also provides international accreditation for sustainable tourism certification bodies, and they have destination criteria for public policymakers and destination managers, and industry criteria for hotel and tour operators. Now, what we're going to find out is that the criteria for all the different sectors has varying results and varying reactions. But the whole point is that it is now trying to develop a common language that everyone can understand, and it's designed to be adapted to local conditions and cultures. We know how difficult it is to number one, set standards, number two, follow standards, number three, to get certification for those standards. We're going to talk about that a little bit more. But the GSTC has got, obviously, it's a UN WTO thing, isn't it? It's backed by them and it has their backing, so that's very important. It was originally aimed at hotels, I believe, but now, and now it's trying to get on the board the big boys, and we're going to talk about that in a second as well. So let me, without any further ado, let me bring on stage, please, Randy Durbin, who is from the he's in fact the CEO of the GSTC. Please welcome him on stage. And Albert Salmon, who is the CEO of Green Destinations. Welcome. Okay, I think we should get to basics, frankly, at the beginning, Randy, because consumers, I don't think, are clear. So, what is being certified? Who should be certified? By whom? And what does it mean anyway?
Well, who's getting certified?
Oh, are you on? It might be a switch there, is there?
At first I thought it was on.
Are we on now?
No, here we go.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, as you said, we're working with hotels and tour operators, primarily and destinations, working closely with Albert and Green Destinations. There is some certification in other aspects, convention centers and this and that, but not a lot. Subsector by subsector, in some cases we don't really even have global standards. So we're looking to expand into MICE, into attractions and so forth. But what's been certified since 1990, we had the first eco-label on hotels. And there's a plethora of labels on hotels. We have in our directory more than 200, creating tremendous confusion in the marketplace because there's so many brands, and so that's a bit of a problem. Tour operators, just a handful. Destinations, just a small amount. So those are kind of the key things that we're talking about. There's a little bit more, but it's basically those three areas.
But I've actually got this list here, I think I've seen it, where you've got sector by sector, and here we go, look. And it actually, this is on your website, isn't it? And hotel accommodation, yes, there is criteria. And actually, they're doing better, aren't they? Hotels are being more compliant, yeah, that's good. Tour operators, likewise, yeah. But then you get to things like MICE, meetings, incentives, and all that stuff. There are no standards, no set standards, is that right?
Well, there's no globally recognized standards. There's ISO 21021, and there's this and that. Events Industry Council in the United States has a standard. But we've been talking to the industry for several years, and there's a real desire on their part for us to use our model of creating highly inclusive standards, because we pride ourselves in an incredibly inclusive process. When we create the criteria, we put out a massive call to all 6 populated countries, to public sector, private sector, academia, everybody. You can go onto our website any minute and add your input for future revisions. So nobody touches us in terms of being a global standard with inclusive input. So because of that, because of what we've done painstakingly for 15 years for hotels, tour operators, and later destinations, there is this desire that some members of the industry have asked us to create them for MICE, and our board has decided to go forward with it in 2023 to create GSTC MICE criteria and attractions.
Then there's also the transport sectors. Now, aviation has IATA guidelines, but no standards.
Well, IATA and ICAO, I think, have guidelines. I'm not sure we could call them standards. Maybe I'm wrong. We decided to completely stay out of that space because they're there, and our founders said, we want you to focus on these areas, especially with hotels with that plethora. So I don't know that you could call them standards, but also cruise lines don't have standards.
And in fact, I think you told me before, they weren't even, cruises and airlines weren't even part of the Paris Agreement.
No.
No, it's just bizarre, isn't it?
The philosophy behind that is because IMO for cruise and ICAO and IATA are quasi-UN agencies. I think that's been the logic, but they're not in the Paris Climate Accord.
Right. So let's just deal quickly with what the problems are to buying into this whole thing about certification with the people that you deal with.
Yeah, I would say we're really struggling with certification for these reasons. One, first of all, a business has to be motivated to be sustainable. Before you can get certified, you need to be sustainable in a holistic way. Even if you're very motivated as a business, holistic is so difficult. It's so challenging. We like to say as a rule of thumb, if a business is motivated and they haven't really done much on sustainability, they need 3 years to consider certification. If they're a long way down the path, they can perhaps do it in a year. But it's a rigorous process. So that's one thing. So already if you're motivated, it's not easy. Secondly, I would say very little of the industry is motivated. You know, when we come to conferences like this, we hear from big brands that have a major brand to manage and risk to manage, but, you know, leisure travel is so fragmented. I've been on the board of directors, the European Tour Operators Association, every committee with USTOA, Canadian Travel Commission, PATA, Asia. I've been in travel for 40 years. It's so bloody open that every time we'd see all these problems, you know, and all these trade associations, most of our problems occurred from some brand we never even heard of. Leisure is extremely fragmented and it's so wide open. So I think that in general, the travel industry is not very motivated to be sustainable first point. So then to get certified, that's a small elite group. And then thirdly, I would say there's demand for sustainability by the consumer. I was just talking about the businesses. But those businesses look at demand for sustainability for the consumers, for the travelers, and I think they really misunderstand the consumer demand. The consumer, the traveler, is not asking for sustainability at point of purchase. Let's just pause and reflect for a moment. When we all buy travel, what are we looking at? We're so caught up in the OTAs and the whole, even if you book direct, it's like, what's the best price I can get for that best quality hotel or that best, you know, the flight that's most convenient to me? It's price, it's price, it's price at time of booking. But interestingly, there's now data showing up in satisfaction demand from the traveler that they expect certification, they don't expect certification, they expect sustainability. Last year's Booking.com survey of 27 countries with 30,000, pretty good, Booking does a good job of global surveys. 53% of travelers globally said they get annoyed now when the service provider is not green enough. That came out of nowhere. And I think the industry has not noticed that. They don't ask the questions about sustainability. They monitor TripAdvisor. They don't measure sustainability, most of them. And so I think we're going to see a wave because everywhere we go in the world, younger generation is angry. Greta Thunberg is not alone. Everybody 35, 40 younger is a little bit angry at previous generations. I think we're going to see a tipping point where travelers will start talking about it, but they don't talk about it a lot. I think it's good for us to admit that, even if people who are passionate about sustainability, to admit it, that at point of purchase they're not asking for it. So I think this has to be driven by businesses. Maybe we'll come to solutions later.
Yeah.
So there's another structural problem is that what we have found, and this is a little bit of a controversial issue, but when UNEP, and it was UNEP and UNWTO that created us. UN Foundation in Washington, D.C. paid for us to have a secretariat, but it was UNEP and UNWTO that together that really designed us. They wanted us to create global standards, and they wanted to give us to produce guidance, as you've said, to good certification. What we have found in these 15 years is that many of the entities you might in this room call a certification body is not truly a certification body, because they violate international norms for what is certification by coaching a business to improvement. You have to have coaching over here. Certification is a judgment. You have to have auditors who are impartial, who are separate from the process. So you don't coach to improvement and then give a star on the paper.
It's like your driving instructor being your tester as well at the end of the...
Exactly.
Yeah.
And so there was those structural issues. And then finally, I would say that everybody wants the prize. They want the mark, but they don't want to do the hard work, or they have the humility to admit that they're not there yet. And to be holistic, to honor the full criteria, is not easy. So what we're now talking to a lot of businesses and governments is give yourself a pathway. Say in 5 years we want to be here, 3 years we want to be here. Let's celebrate landmark progress along the way. But I think those of us involved in the certification community have been too guilty of just saying, push all the way to the top, and we believe passionately in only rigorously rewarding those to reach the top. But we need to give the pathway to get there. And so we kind of changed our messaging to help businesses move up.
Okay. So Albert, you are a certification body, and you're not one of those that coaches them and then marks them afterwards. No. But okay, explain, number one, what Green Destinations is about and how you see certification.
Yeah, I'm a little more optimistic about certification than Randy. I think actually there is no justification not to start the process. Forget about the market value of it. It's limited. When you're a certified hotel, you'll be getting a tag on Google Travel and Booking.com like eco-friendly. But for the other sectors, it's not yet true. So forget about the market value. But think about the inherent value, the intrinsic value of actually starting to realize in which you're actually performing well and in which you're not performing well. What is your agenda for improvement? Do you have one? Do you need one? And what's your strong points that you can actually communicate to your travelers, to your future clients, with a reference to a certifying body? So we do, as Green Destinations, certification of destinations, even of whole countries if they're very small, and of DMOs, in principle also of national tourism organizations like DMOs. Any tourism business in travel and tourism, if they're actually comparable, if they're relevant, if they're sort of covered by the GSC industry standard, and also travel products and events. So start with the process. We can actually, refer you to people who can be your coaches, and start considering what's your strong points, what's your weak points, and when you have realized that you have many strong points, then you can proceed with certification. But I would say start with the process, use the GSCC criteria, and there is no reason why you shouldn't, because the traveler expects you to be offering sustainable travel products.
But Randy just said that there's no motivation on the part of a lot of businesses or destinations to be involved in this. What are you saying? That they are motivated? They do want to get involved?
A lot of businesses actually. We've been contacted by one of the biggest attractions, theme parks in Europe. They said, we're not sure whether we actually are eligible or suitable already far enough for certification, but we want to become more sustainable, and we know that there are criteria, and that you have GD criteria, and that you implement also the GSC criteria. So how can we start? So there is, I think, yes, there is interest to get started. We noticed that.
And let's work this out, because you're saying that people at the lower, normal people, consumers, tourists, say they want it, but they're not going to go, they expect it to be given to them. Is that fair? And that it should be the bodies at the top. And even when it comes down to the little guys, for instance, restaurateurs, they will say, well, why we don't want to spend money doing this, because it should be the big guys leading this whole thing. So is that essentially one of the problems?
That's actually the case, and because we started from the destination point of view, and we say destinations, you can't be sustainable, you can't promote yourself as a sustainable destination unless your business sector joins the sustainability principles implementation. And it's not just the Hiltons and the big hotels. No, it's the small hotels, the small businesses, rooted in the local community. So we have developed ways, let's say step 1, 2, 3, towards the GST certification for micro businesses and SMEs that can actually be certified for from 100 euros per year. Okay, is that an obstacle? No, it's not.
So, Randy, an interesting thing that I think that's happened to you is that hotels and inbound tour operators are good. They tend to be interested. Mm-hmm. Destinations and outbound operators not so good about certification. Can you explain why that is?
Well, I would say that the inbound tour operators, DMCs, have largely been driven by, in 2016, WWF, working with Royal Caribbean Cruise Lines, convinced them to do preferred contracting for shore excursions. And as soon as Royal Caribbean did that, they said in their contracting that when the bids for the land tour operator at a shore excursion, when price and quality are similar, they'll give the contract to the entity that's certified GSTC criteria. And they exceeded expectations about how quickly they moved. So now this tour operator said, oh, nobody ever asked me for certification before. Well, now Royal Caribbean just granted you a 3-year contract instead of a 2-year contract, and you got it because of the other guy. Wow. Certification isn't very expensive all of a sudden. So, we've really been talking to a lot of businesses. So happy to see Nicole here with Amex GBT. They joined on GSTC a year and a half ago. Other major brands are looking at this preferred contracting model. It's proven in every other sector. Kimberly-Clark made FSC famous when they went all in. FSC was nothing for its first 7 years.
Wood and
paper.
Wooden, but yeah.
And Unilever made MSC on fish and seafood great. We need the industry to drive this. We created the framework for the industry. Now it's up to the industry to use the bloody thing and put it to work as it's designed, because it's the most credible structural foundation. And this is extremely important now because, the 10 years of ESG growth, ESG, still less than half of ESG reporting has external verification. More and more businesses are realizing, and their lawyers are realizing. In UK, the CMA, the Competitive Markets Authority, is looking hard now at greenwashing and travel and tourism. So you have to get your house in order. You need a credible system. Well, there's not much more credible than what we've built. So I think if industry pushes it, and governments need to push it. We've been spending a tremendous amount of time the past year with Singapore and Turkey, as Turkey now wants to be known.
Now, Turkey is an interesting case. Just tell me a little bit about Turkey. What's happened there? They bought into this.
Yeah, when everybody in the world had a health safety program during COVID, necessarily to have some tourism alive, Turkey did it very methodically with ISO-based system, very methodical system with proper auditing and proper controls. They built that operation. They created a quasi-agency controlled by the Ministry of Tourism. And they said afterwards, let's keep this all in place and let's do green tourism in a very methodical way. Turkey is about to announce something that I think will blow you away. They're mandating, is it still on?
I'm not sure.
They're
Keep going off.
mandating
Yep.
that a hotel will get certified to our scheme by 2030, and there's steps along the way. When you think about the carrot and stick, Singapore has a carrot. They're subsidizing the certification, and they're subsidizing the education to get to the certification. So Singapore, we've been working with the carrot. Turkey has the stick, and they passed a law on tourism where the Ministry of Tourism will have the power to revoke a business license. So I think when we see governments look, it's amazing to me that governments in tourism have not done what every other sector has done. In every other sector, they look at their National Standards Board, who are experts in standards, and, for safety and health. That's all clean in every industry, but for some reason, tourism has just ignored international norms for certification.
Do you believe that by Turkey doing this, and I'm going to ask this to both of you, and I want to talk about the website in a second as well. Do you believe by Turkey doing this, they will gain competitive advantage as a tourism destination in the future?
I think they will, because everybody really wants it, but nobody's known how to make this happen. And Turkey comes in with this strong model to make it happen. I've got to believe Greece and Spain are going to, in the Mediterranean world, I can't imagine them not.
Do you know what? For the first time, I've got time to actually ask if anybody wants to ask questions. So please have anything in mind to do that. If you have got a question, raise your hand, please, and say who you are. We'll come to you in 1 second. I just want to ask about, thank you. I want to ask you, yes, Albert, about the website that you think will help, because marketing, you think, is one of the issues here, right?
Yeah, and connecting to the last question, like, will Turkey have benefit of doing this? Only when they communicate it well. I mean, the certified status does not give sufficient market advantage. So you need actually to have a more sophisticated website, but also social media and everything, marketing program that should be independent from the certifiers, that actually tells, so it should be all the media people in this conference that perhaps could sit together for a minute and say, can we make this? To actually give meaning and impact to whatever hotels or destinations have reached, have performed under, and that's been confirmed by the certification. And that's what we need to give certification a market impact.
And you think that the media should play more of a role?
Yes.
How?
Well, perhaps a sustainable tourism initiative by a partnership of media partners. And they could also benefit from that as a partnership. So like, we are actually promoting sustainability and telling you as a traveler what's real sustainability, so we can forget about all these hundreds of websites that claim to be green, and it's mainly greenwashing.
Yeah, the greenwashing, horrible greenwashing thing comes back again, doesn't it? I've just been told I am short of time, but I did offer to have a question from the audience. Can we get a microphone to the?
Yeah, I think it's a good auditorium. So
Okay, great.
So, I'm representing a delegation, small delegation here from the Republic of Moldova, really tiny destination in the Eastern Europe, which is now under these hurdles with the war, etc. And I picked up on what you just said, both of the speakers, on the certification of the destinations. So besides the SMEs or the participants to the value chain that want to be certified, in case if they want, under some sustainability standards that exist, there are also destinations, and we are a small, tiny destination, as you just called, that as part of the public policy that is in the making now for approval, one of the pillar is actually to become a sustainable destination. So how to achieve that? Looking at what is available on the international advisory market, let's say, and the UNWTO standards, we understand that there might be also this chance to maybe do like a hybrid based on the Singapore and the Turkey example, so that we don't have too much influence on the state agencies or the NTAs, but design a code of sustainability or sustainability practices that would be really applicable and customized on the model and the situation we are. Then we can design a list of target indicators that we can measure to measure our progress in implementing this. But we have still a question that we cannot answer is who can actually be a third party so that we are more credible on the global market, that could actually come and certify that Moldova does what it has said in the code of conduct and it is progressive against the roadmap of indicators.
Okay.
And maybe one of your organizations could also help us to design and develop this code of sustainability. If you have such examples, we would be glad.
Let's answer
Sounds
that
like the
question.
Slovenia model. Albert's involved in what we call in the industry the Slovenia model, where they have a national program, but they bring in the expert certification bodies. So it's a big topic. We'd be happy to help and follow up, but I think it's too big to
It's too big.
comment too
But,
much.
I think this is one of those let's talk afterwards type situations. But I mean,
But a hybrid,
yeah.
absolutely. I mean, there's a lot of creative ways to do this.
Okay, sadly, we run out of time, and we do need to move on to the next session. I really want to thank Albert and Randy. I think, Randy, you're sticking around for the next...
I'm on the next one.
You're on the
so
next
I
one too, aren't you? Yeah. But thank you very much indeed to these two gentlemen, because they really care about what they're doing, and I think it will make a massive difference. Thank you.
Well done.
Okay, now then, we are now going to look at the problem and the solutions for the sometimes controversial practice of carbon offsetting and also of carbon capture. So by doing that, we are using technology and AI carbon impact measurements. To tell us more about that, can I please bring onto the stage to take over Didier. Where is Didier? There he is, fantastic. Didier, take over, and can you introduce your panelists too, please?
Welcome. So thanks a lot. So I will maybe our fantastic panelists could join the stage. Hilary. So Hilary Matson. Is she there? Yes. Theodora Marinska, Randy Durban, Kit Brennan, and Lucas Bodas. Welcome on board. So let me, if you were to introduce our panelists, and then, yes, around that topic of carbon offsetting. So Hilary, after some years at another e-commerce huge company based in the US, so 2 years ago you decided to launch a new company, a platform, Jungen Health Site, a sustainable travel, online travel agency, but focusing on advice, services, and to target sustainable tourism, sustainable trips, and passionate advocate for educating all of you and all of us regarding sustainability, of course, focusing also on the education of our clients regarding sustainability. So thank you, Hilary, to join. Theodora, so Theodora is right now a CEO and head of public affairs of European Travel Commission, we could call it ETC. She's leading the ETC sustainability agenda and working a lot for all his climate change plan. She's also one of you could talk to for any kind of topics, policy makers in Brussels. And so she is a strong advocate regarding tourism and what should be done for changing that world, sustainable tourism. Kit. So Kit is the second on the panel platforms developer and in the innovation. So we have after Hilary, so Kit have designed, defined, launched, found Carbon Trust, carbon platform that she helped us with all the data to transform and power sustainability, what company, what travel that could be, and through his own platform, the data provide intelligence for up to $52 billion of annual travel spent. So thanks a lot, Kit. We also have the voice of the industry with Lucas Bobs. He's over the last 70 years, he worked for Amadeus, and during 13 years, he is right now the Group Environment Officer and Head of ESG Planning for, as we all know, the Amadeus company. And you know him already from the previous panel and discussion. So Randy. So Randy is CEO of GSTS, the Global Sustainable Tourism Council. Before 40 years in the industry, managing, leading some tour operators, and right now you have decided to switch the call, the social call or the sustainability call, to work on a more systematic, providing business sense solution to sustainable tourism and travel. So all really focused on that topics regarding sustainability. So the roundtable is around carbon offsetting, carbon capture, and as you have already seen this morning, that's we have the huge topic regarding the fact that the carbon emission, it's circa 7-8% of the total emission of the world regarding travel. So a lot to do that will increase over the next years with the catch-up effect on some major countries who will continue to travel. So we can work on the carbon reduction because it's not here to say, yes, we need to stop to travel. it's how we could switch to a way that we could continue to travel, but of course have a strong, real, hard reduction of the carbon. So the industry have started to work. You have heard regarding SAF, regarding new generation of aircraft, regarding new building materials for the hotels, etc., etc. And we have two other pillars we would like to discuss today. Is one regarding all the carbon offsetting and carbon capture. Maybe we could better understand what does it mean exactly. That two words, carbon offsetting in a whole. And then the key topics, already maybe a little bit tackled by Randy a few minutes ago, but maybe we could go into more detail regarding the data on the measurement. Because if we want to increase, if we want to progress, we need to measure. And that will be the topics. Is it some data and measurement for the whole industry travel, or is it by sub-segments? How that could be understandable for our customers. So that will be all the topics. You will have some answers after that roundtable. So maybe a first question for Kit. Maybe in in 3 minutes, what does it mean, the term of offsetting? What is the definition that you could share with us?
Sure. It's working? Yeah. So offsetting, quite a controversial term. For good reason. And effectively what it means is that when you emit, you can pay for another part of industry to decarbonize in your place. Typically, this is if done properly, big if, it's a great opportunity to drive spend towards helping low-income nations decarbonize, or to decarbonize easier wins within industry. A classic example is aviation, right? There's no way really to fly at the moment without emitting CO2, but instead you can pay for another part of an industry to decarbonize. Now, a proper carbon offset needs to kind of satisfy at least 3 criteria. One is something we call additionality. So this is the idea that a carbon reduction could not have occurred without purchasing the offset. Okay, so if you're going to build a wind farm, you can't have just built it anyway because it was the cheapest thing to do, as is often the case with wind energy now. And so you actually see fewer and fewer wind turbine carbon offsets come through. So that's one way of avoiding abuse of the system. The second is that it's properly verified. So any carbon offset that you purchase should be verified by an independent third-party body. It's very akin to the hotel industry and having third-party respectable verification. It's the same thing with carbon offsets. You shouldn't just say we put a solar panel on our roof and therefore we've avoided carbon and claim that benefit, although those are a very good thing to do. It's really important that there's third-party trusted sources. And thirdly, and this is often forgotten, is a carbon offset has to have already occurred, has to have occurred in the past. So when someone says they're planting a tree tomorrow, that's not a carbon offset. That's a great thing to do. It's important to plant trees, but that is not a carbon offset. Instead, a tree should have been planted, say, a decade ago, and then you're able to say, we know this tree has sequestered a ton of carbon, and therefore they can sell that offset right. So in a nutshell, that is carbon offsetting. And then the final thing I'll say is carbon offsetting will help us get to carbon neutral. So this is the idea that you can take all of the all of your emissions and then offset it somewhere else in industry, and it should balance out to 0. It does not get us to net 0. So a carbon offset does not reduce your emissions, it does not capture carbon. And so in terms of a world for travel, a world we all very much want to continue living in, travel is great. Offsets are a stopgap to the final solution, which is to reach net 0.
Thanks a lot, Kit. Do you want to add some additional? No? So if not, so Luca, maybe what for that carbon offset, what do we need for offsetting that carbon as a company?
Well, complementing what Kit said, I would like to say 2 things about carbon offsetting that, well, actually about the greenhouse gas effect that are often overlooked. No, the first thing, and you tell me if it is wrong, the first thing is that greenhouse gas emissions mix more or less uniformly in the atmosphere. And the second is that they stay in the atmosphere for a long period of time. I think there's some scientific debate still about this, but I think it's well understood that, for example, carbon dioxide stays at a minimum of 100 years in the atmosphere. So what this means is that for the purposes of this session is, I think, two things. One is that it doesn't matter if you reduce emission in point A of the planet or in point B in the other side of the world, where the emissions are easier, for example, to reduce. And the second thing that it means is that because carbon stays in the atmosphere for a long period of time, even if we stop all emissions today, the concentration already existing is too high to reach the targets. So that's why carbon capture makes sense. So I would like to clarify these two things first. And then going on into the why offsetting makes sense and how companies can help doing that, following on from my reasoning, then we will find activities like aviation where decarbonization is either too difficult or simply not available with the current level of technology. You explain, we can already fly short distances with electrical flights, not commercially yet, but I think we're getting there. But then long distance is not possible. So then what you do when you fly long distance is to try to reduce those emissions somewhere else where the technology is available and where it is cheaper. And in fact, I would like to highlight that there is the possibility, and that's a beauty of carbon offsetting, of actually accelerating the action against climate change by going to reduce emissions first where it is easy and where it is cheaper. It's simply economically more convenient. And I will just stop here, but I would like to make a caveat because this is important. There's an observation that we have to make. This doesn't mean that aviation can rely on making offsets, and then just use the current level of technology. Carbon offset is always like a sort of second best option, in the sense that, well, the idea is that we all have to reduce emissions, all sectors have to reduce emissions at some point. If there are some sectors that cannot do it now, then offsetting makes sense, especially because also there is a price gap. But it's important to understand that it is not a final, let's say, and total solution, and that it should be used as a second best.
And Luca, maybe for Amadeus, have you some concrete example of how, for Amadeus or maybe for some other players you are working with, how do you have in your policy some levers regarding carbon offsetting and or carbon capture for your own activities, or as you know, for the industry of already implement some great solutions?
Well, there are two things. I think we have to walk the talk first, and that we do. Basically, we have two main activities internally. Is mainly related to data processing. We use it in market instruments similar to carbon offsetting, not exactly the same. That is called guarantees of origin of renewable energy, so that the emissions of our data center are reduced to zero. And then the opportunity where we really have, where the quantitative difference is that we process approximately 400 million reservations a year. That means that we have 1 million opportunity, more than 1 million opportunities per day to communicate indirectly, because it's through travel agencies, to travelers. And we inform them about schedules, availability, fares, and we also include CO2 information. We have to agree still in the industry how to do this exactly, but that's another thing. I don't want to monopolize the conversation, but the idea is to inform travelers not only about the classic information, but also about CO2, and then to facilitate offsetting. We have just reached recently an agreement with a company called Choose to facilitate the adoption of carbon offsetting in our distribution platforms.
Okay, crystal clear. Thanks a lot, Lucas. Theodora, in the offsetting, from your how to do it, regarding regulations, regarding funds, through what you are looking from your ETC ISIS, what do you think we need to implement or the industry should do?
Well, at ETC we also do, thank we also do marketing. We promote Europe as a tourism destination in long-haul markets. So people coming here do leave a big carbon footprint because there's no other way to come except by flying. And what we see is that there's still a lack of trust, maybe, in consumers, which would then push them to offset on a larger scale. And the whole offsetting thing hasn't really taken off, especially with consumers. Now we see, business travel, and this was discussed this morning. We see that it's really an engine for a host system to start working. But maybe a bit more of a transparency would really help with offsetting. And I think that something else that we see would work is to actually make offsetting work on the aviation industry. Because aviation industry, and this is why it relies so much on offsetting, technology-wise, we won't have solutions in the next 10, 15 years. And even then, for medium and long haul, it's still going to be very difficult. So we need offsetting, but we could channel the funds that we receive through offsetting into technologies that could help aviation decarbonize in the long run. And this is when carbon capture becomes increasingly interesting, because the third generation of sustainable aviation fuels, the synthetic fuel, it uses green hydrogen and could be carbon captured from the atmosphere. So this could be, it's a bit of a dream, but having a sustainable aviation fund that would actually use the carbon captured, which was sponsored by offsets, into making synthetic fuel. This could be one of the solutions, but there are many other technologies in the development that could profit from funds coming from actually consumers offsetting. And it's also a bit, if we don't want to look at it from, I would say, regulation point of view, but if we think of the industry trying to kind of establish some kind of standard that would make it easier for consumers to decide and to compare, because now there are, I would say, but maybe you can prove me wrong, there are way too many options to offset, especially for the one, for somebody who is not really an expert in the field.
So thanks a lot. So yes, the key question regarding the trust, the communication, and how our customers or your customers could be really comfortable with the fact when they order or book a trip, they are able to have the best sustainable trip. Hilary, on that topic, what do you think regarding the communication and the education of the customers? What is the best way? Is it your platform? Is it certification? Is it Lloyd's, Bureau Veritas, and so on, third-party certification? Is it carbon? What could be the solution? And maybe Keith could also elaborate on that afterward.
So my first thought is that I don't like how much of this burden feels like it's foisted onto the individuals, which is not to say that we as travelers who choose to travel or who have the luxury or privilege to travel shouldn't do something, because I believe we all should. But the majority of the problem is not going to be solved by individuals carbon offsetting and hoping that it's not a scam and trusting the transparency of what is going behind that carbon offset or carbon capture. So what I think would be a lot more effective is more regulation and collaboration between governments and large companies, specifically airlines, where they could require, for example, that airlines have an option for customers to add carbon offsets to their flight. They could require that if a customer does that, the airline company has to match it. They could require a certain amount of sustainable aviation fuel to be used. They could require airlines to be carbon neutral, which feels like a crazy thought, but like what if that is just how it needed to be, and they had to figure out a way to do that, which is either increasing prices or reducing the number of flights or putting more on business travelers. There's so many different ways, but I think for leisure travelers, it's quite overwhelming, and there's this sort of resistance. There's a skepticism of knowing what's real and what's fake. There's a confusion with the different certifications. There's the infamous planting a tree, which feels more like a very poorly applied Band-Aid than anything. So, I just think a lot of things aren't very effective, and it does become hard to educate travelers about that. And so what we do is we have sustainable travel resources, we have climate impact resources, we incorporate carbon offsets through Sustainable Travel International into our checkout process. We're working on incorporating carbon capture through Tomorrow's Air into our checkout process. And then as a company, we're carbon neutral. So we're trying our best to lead by example and making it really easy for our travelers to opt in, trusting that we've done the research. But it's very complicated. And even when you kind of spoon feed it, even when people say they care about sustainability, not everybody is going to opt in. So again, it kind of circles back to like, I don't think we can rely on leisure travelers to solve this problem. It's so much bigger than that.
So complex topic if the trust is not there. Kit, have you some concrete levers that a company must implement for carbon capture or offsetting, but something concrete? And then, yes, okay, we will communicate, we will educate, we will do our best, but have we some real vehicles, vehicles to process on that way?
Yeah. So the first thing that is kind of just a truth is that companies will need to get to net zero by 2050. It's not mandated in many countries yet, but it's coming. And as the climate crisis gets worse, the regulation is going to get more and more strict. And in my opinion, it's completely inevitable, certainly for most high-income nations, that they can expect regulation in the next couple of decades to require them to get to net zero. So then the next question from that is how they do it. And exactly as we've said, right, long-haul aviation will not be solved by electric planes. That's, for various reasons, that's basically against the rules of physics. It could be solved by hydrogen planes. That is decades away. So it requires sustainable aviation fuel. Sustainable aviation fuel is expensive. It's currently sold out for the next 3 years at least, and I think in 3 years' time it will be sold out for 3 years again. So if you're a business and you want a concrete lever that enables you to still fly and to meet the regulations that will be coming, then what you need to do today is start putting in your plan. You need to start working out when are you going to start buying things like sustainable aviation fuel. You need to start talking to suppliers now and communicating, if you're going to be staying in a hotel in 5 years' time, that hotel needs to start getting certified. It needs to start doing things to reduce its carbon footprint. Same with your car suppliers. If you don't do that, then you're going to be on the back foot in a couple of years, and you might find it very difficult to meet your climate goals, and therefore you'll end up having to reduce the amount of travel. And again, the ideal world is one where we can all travel and not have a carbon footprint or any footprint on nature. And so it's at this point in time about planning, about setting up those relationships, because the levers you can actually do today are very small, except for changing the mode of transport and changing the amount you travel.
Thank you so much, Kit. So still not so easy, even if the sustainable aviation fuel, the e-fuel, the technology seems to be mature, but need to be found with some cash to move on some plants at scale. So it's thousands maybe of new plants, but that could happen if we found a way for framing and maybe also reinsure some private equity funds or funds that they could invest, and that will be the investments they could do now, could be amortized in the next 20 or 30 years. That's maybe one of the topics we should address. It's also the trust of the clients, but also the trust of the new investors. Maybe Hilary, regarding the destinations, as you are working a lot for, as we all know, we have some destinations where the GDP is up, with the tourism and the travel is up to 25% of the total GDP. Mauritius Island, Greece, Seychelles, etc., etc. So for such a destination where that could be, they have some sea rising, they have some maybe impact from the others, they could be considered higher polluters due to the fact that you need to fly 6 to 10 hours for getting the destination. So what they could do and how they could find some solution around offsetting and capture, but could they do something?
Yes, there's always something to do. I think with some of those destinations that do rely a lot more on tourism than other countries as part of their GDP, A lot of times it's smaller island states or island nations where everything has to be imported. And I think like when we talk about sustainable tourism, a lot of the emphasis is usually on the environmental aspect, but there's also the economic and the sociocultural aspect. And this is an interesting area because you could say, okay, you want to reduce travelers so that it protects the environment, these fragile ecosystems, limited resources on these locations. Sometimes there's limited water. But if you have less tourists, you have less tourism money. And so not everybody's going to be okay with that. And so there needs to be a collaboration between the government and the local companies. And as much as we in this room might love the triple bottom line method, most companies are, especially coming out of COVID, they're just focused on making money. So I think going back to some of these themes of like the carrot and the stick, my personal opinion is it's too late for the carrot. We need to just like push people along. And I think for these companies, that is going to come potentially in the form of government subsidies that says, we will reduce your taxes, we will make it cheaper and easier for you to do these things because we understand that you don't have the time, the money, the resources, the motivation, whatever it is to do this on your own. And we just don't have time for that anymore. So I think in these locations, we need a bigger step up from the government to figure out how to help them. And tourism tax is an option, but I think that's like a whole different maybe panel topic. So I'll just throw that out there and pause.
Thanks a lot. So if I well understood, we need regulation, we need certification, we need to invest massively in SAF for aviation, and we need trust, maybe through a third party. But before maybe to have some trust, maybe we could move on the second pillar of that roundtable around technology and carbon impact measurements. Randy, based on what you have done, of your work, of the certification, how maybe to implement some robust system for the data transparency? Is it for each sub-industry or is it for the total travel? How make things happen and with the objective of improvement for the companies, for the states, and trust and transparency for the customers?
I think it does have to be subset. We have one microphone for the five of us. Hello. Okay. It does need to be subsectoral, like I said earlier, with certification, because they're very different businesses, so you need different approaches. We need universal tools, I think, and we have to figure that out by subsector. So where we work in hospitality intensively, for example, the Sustainable Hospitality Alliance in London has their HCMI, Hotel Carbon Measurement Initiative. And only about 30-some thousand hotels are using that now, but they've just revamped it and made it easier. But the point is, here's this big effort on carbon measurement in one subsector, and we're just sort of refining it. We have we have to measure carbon for all sorts of businesses, attractions, theme parks, inbound operators, outbound operators, all the different kinds of elements. So we've got a long ways to go. So in our work, you asked about our work with certification. When we're 15 years old, and we, as I said earlier, we spent years developing this system, this credible system based on international norms for proper certification. So we were really kind of focused on a global system that was based on continuous improvement rather than specific targets. But now we're moving into measurement because we believe the technologies are such that we can expect almost as much from the developing world as from the developed world. And so we're moving into this world of setting measures of targets to get certification. And we're extremely frustrated because then we look around and we learned how bad the situation is, that there's just not good universal measures. So now we're working with major brands. We've already been working with Booking.com, part of the Travelist Group, on hotel sustainability filtering. And now we're going to work with Travelist and with others, WTTC and others, and we're just kind of forming this group to just agree to say, we're all interested in others are invited. And so what we really need to do, I think, is have agreement, do some vetting, subsector by subsector, start with carbon, crisis with climate change, but then we need to move on. And thank you, Hillary, for talking about the social issues. And by the way, I have to say, thank you for saying that about SIDS, Small Island Developing States. We believe passionately that If rich world travelers don't go to the Seychelles or Mauritius or Vanuatu, then those small island developing states become victims of climate change two ways. Oceans are going to destroy their homes, and then some of them have 40% plus GDP based on tourism. So we take away their livelihood because of our guilt. I'd rather have the rich world have fewer flights. Don't get on a plane for one business trip, or don't get on a plane for one short leisure weekend. Anyway, that's my social, thank you for that digression. You know, measurements that are universal tools, there's so much work to be done. I think we need government, NGOs, industry to really get behind sorting this out and starting with key subsectors, work on them one by one.
Thanks a lot, Randy. Maybe Lucas, at the company level, how you manage the data, you manage that measurements that you could provide for your stakeholders, your ecosystem, airlines, airports, tour operators, and also, as you mentioned previously, you can provide such a data to the customers.
Yeah, as I said, the opportunity for us mainly is about communicating to travelers, we believe, no? Because that's where we believe we can have more value. And that's a fundamentally difficult thing. And I think here maybe we can start to understand why is it so difficult to inform travelers about the impact of their trips. If you want to inform a passenger in an aircraft about how much emissions are released as a consequence of this trip, there are three things that influence why this calculation is difficult. First of all, because you need a lot of data. If the booking is done, say, 3 months in advance, you probably don't even know which aircraft is going to fly. Least of all, how many people is going to be there to split the total aircraft emissions. So that's one area, the availability of data that influences the calculation. The second is that there are still some scientific uncertainties about the effects of emissions at altitude, how they contribute to contrails, for example, and how these impacts change from one flight to another. And that is a complex thing. And the third part is about some subjective decisions that you have to make. I was making reference to the load factor. Then if you are on a flight, you have to decide which load factor are you going to use to divide the total emissions of the aircraft by the number of passengers in the aircraft. Is it the passengers of the day of the flight? What if the flight is empty? Are you going to blame the passenger for that? Or are you going to take an average? And if you take an average, what is that average? So these are the three things in summary. Data availability, scientific uncertainty, and subjective decisions that you have to take. And we don't want to make them. We are a commercial entity. We need standards to set these frameworks that we can all use. Because the worst that can happen is to search the emissions in one source, and I get 3 times less than in another. And this is actually happening today. This is also why we have also joined the Travelist Coalition. We believe they have done something that nobody else, to my knowledge, have achieved, which is to bring together a critical mass of players, because at the moment, rather than precision exactly out how much emissions are released, we need consensus. We need to clearly inform passengers, just as we do with schedules. We tell the passenger, your flight leaves at 6 p.m. We need to tell the passenger also, this is the expected emissions for your flight. And this has to be something that we relate to something that they can understand so that they can manage it. And there's a lot of things at stake here, because as I said, if we make this information common, it is a critical first step to take action from travelers. And travelers trigger action also from airlines, trigger action from governments, trigger action from industry association, etc.
So a lot of stakeholders to cooperate regarding that data. Maybe one of the last questions, Kit, regarding the data. And I don't know how we can say it's artificial intelligence, is it blockchain, whatever, to get the right data within the whole value chain, the whole partners, for at the end securing the customers and the industry that carbon or all the other emissions are really going down.
Yeah. So I mean, I'd avoid avoid buzzwords like artificial intelligence and blockchain.
I love that buzzword. I am a consultant.
Absolutely. Well, it's a funny one, right? Because calculating carbon doesn't need to be difficult. In theory, all you need is the fuel burn of an aircraft or whatever vehicle, right? So it's actually a data acquisition problem. The airlines do not share the fuel burn for their aircraft on all of their routes. It's for operational reasons, very good reasons. But either way, it means it's very hard to calculate carbon. And why our business even exists and where we specialize is about bringing as many data sources as possible to make that possible. And it's not just related to carbon, right? It's true of hotels as well, and rail and car. There's this question of, okay, there's over 1 million hotels in the world. What's the most sustainable? Well, that's over 1 million data points. There's 1 million hotels, all with hundreds of data points. So that's one of the biggest challenges. And I really agree with Hilary on this point that government regulation is needed. The only people who are going to share data are those that are above average, because they know that they'll look better. If you're below average, well, it makes sense not to share your data, because then you fall in with the average. So that's certainly one of the biggest challenges. AI is useful for calculating where you think someone should be on that scale. Blockchain, I'll won't comment on.
Thanks a lot, Kate. So as we need to stop now due to time reasons, the resume could be on that second topic regarding measurements, still the certification for the first topic, and then for the data is how we could have the set of data, cleaning data, collaboration within data, and maybe also third party for the validation of that place of truth regarding the data related and conform with the certification, with the framework. So if I may have a word for the conclusion, that will be still the coordination and cooperation within the industry. And the how, yes, we have some solution, but who could be the entity who could drive? That's all what you are explaining. So the solution will not have out of that roundtable, but maybe for the next one, I hope so. So thank you so much for that fantastic panels. Thanks a lot.
It's on now. Yeah. Thank you. Yeah, it's all good. Thank you. Okay, everybody. We are now going to talk about the link between agriculture and the food industries and the food industry and its relationship and link with travel. Did you know, and surveys show us this, that for every €25, for example, that a traveller spends on a winery, when they visit a winery, they spend €50 in the local economy. That money translates to €50 in the local economy. It's a relationship between travel and agriculture that could be so beneficial to both sides. But guess what? There are problems. We're back to the issue of sectors not collaborating very well, and therefore there being problems with that. And we're going to explore that right now with two thought leaders who have roadmaps really as to how to make agritourism succeed at scale. So let me please invite onto the stage Mélanie Tisney-Versailles, who is the Delegate Councillor Agritourism Region, for Agritourism, the region of Occitania. Hello Mélanie, how are you? I'm sorry about, can I pronounce your name okay? Thank you. And then can I also please welcome to the stage Feđa Begović. He's a development expert from Bosnia and Herzegovina. He's got a fan club there. He's been working on a USAID funded project in trying to integrate farmers and food producers in the tourist chain. So these guys know what they're talking about, but they are also facing problems. So let's deal with that. It could be, and I'm going to use this term, Mélanie advised it could be such a fertile area, couldn't it? It could be this collaboration between agriculture and tourism could be. What is the issue in this region that you are finding?
Hello, everyone. So first of all, I would like to come back on the definition. On the definition of agritourism. So if you Google it, you will find the following definition. It's tourism, which tourists stay in countryside with local people, which is, in my opinion, an incorrect definition. It's not local people, it's farmers. Agritourism, it's about tourism in a farm. And it's about the relationship between urban citizens and farmers. And I think this is a key point.
Yep.
So the first issue, so maybe you don't know, but in Occitanie, the average of the revenue is €1,000 per month for a farmer.
So it's really poor wage.
It's less than €1,000.
Yeah.
And we are not only living an extinction of biodiversity, but also an extinction of farmers. Because in the 10 years to come, we are going to lose 50% of them because they are going to retire. So that's a main problem. And we built in the past our agritourism program with the key player of tourism and not with the farmers. So from now, we are starting building our program, including the farmers. And there are a lot of key players in agritourism who work in their own side. And so we are putting them around the same table and to try to find a common strategy. So that's our first.
So the fact is, Mélanie, is that agricultural labourers, farmers, could earn a lot more money if they embraced agritourism, if they got involved in that. It'd be good for them. But you point out one thing, which is that there is urban and rural. There is a split. There is mistrust, isn't there, between the two sides? Méfiance, yeah, between the two sides, because the farmers don't really understand what it is about. I think there's just a lack of comprehension on both sides. Can you elaborate on that? Why don't they understand each other? What's going on there?
Well, they don't understand each other because 100 years ago, we all have grandparents who were farmers. And it's not the case anymore because there are only 5% of people now who are farmers. So we don't have the link with them anymore. So agritourism is an answer for that. And also, farmers are not proud anymore about their job. And as a politician, it's our job to make them to be proud of it. So we have to help them, to finance them, especially the farmers who improve their business model and the way of making their job more environmentally, in a very good environmentally way.
Yeah.
And to help them to not, to be proud in a way of not making a Disneyland farm, and to be proud of what they are. So don't dress it up and show it what it is.
Okay. We will talk shortly. We haven't got much time, but we will talk about what we think are the ways forward in trying to make that situation better. But Feja, let's talk about Bosnia-Herzegovina, because you are now involved in that. And this is a big drive now to get local farmers, agricultural people, to be involved in tourism. Can you explain a little bit about your story and what you're doing?
Yes, thank you, Rajan. So there is a small region of Bosnia called Herzegovina, or a small part of the country called Herzegovina, which was recently inscribed as a cultural route of the Council of Europe as Herzegovina wine route. And like you said, there's more to the wine route than just the wine itself. And one of the experiences we wanted to show in that region are the farmers, are the agricultural producers, food producers across the region. And we basically started from the disconnect that Melanie was talking about between urban and rural. I found a French research that says that 80% of the wine tourists are actually from urban areas. And nowadays, with the disconnect, between the two, it's becoming something of an exotic experience for them to see some farmers in the field and just to learn about how they live, how they produce the food that we eat every day, that we typically buy in the supermarket without knowing how it was made and where it comes from. Let me tell you a little experience that I had recently. There was a big VIP delegation coming from the United States to Bosnia and Herzegovina. And we are talking about CEO, vice presidents of the company that has 5,000 people. We decided to take them to a small beekeeper in the southern Herzegovina, close to Dubrovnik. And they were amazed when this guy started opening beehives and explaining them the role of the queen bee and of the bees individually and talking about honey and propolis and other products. Before that, he gave them a story about how he started with this just from reading a book about beekeeping. He was so fascinated. And he said, I'll go buy some beehives, and his wife wanted to kill him. And now his whole family is basically living from this. They have 200 beehives. And when the visitors come to their place, he tells them a story about how he started, how he was an engineer working in a factory, but he wanted to do something else, and how now he enjoys every day of doing this. And then he talks about the products, and then his wife brings the honey cake and some, honey with chocolate or something, and there's some honey brandy and other products that they're proud of. And suddenly you have this 1 hour experience that completely takes you to a new world. As consumers today, we tend to just grab something from the shelf and put it in the basket and come home, make something. You don't think about your food. So I think there is huge potential in connecting the travelers from many types of tourism to food producers, because we all have to eat. We all start the day with some food, we end the day with some food. And agriculture has this huge potential to offer something that's translated into a wonderful and memorable experience.
So let's then look at the slight barriers to making this work really well. Number one is, do you think that the farmers themselves totally understand the tourism model well enough, or are you having to teach them about that?
There has to be a lot of teaching. So, and not only for farmers. I've been in the agricultural sector for about 15 years. And I've been in the tourism sector for only about 3 years. I see a lot of touching points but I also see a lot of misunderstandings, and I see a lot of need to bring the two together and to help them to work together. Farmers, especially if you know what Melanie said, is the case in Bosnia. I don't even want to say the number of their monthly income is really, it's like 500 euros is huge. And for them, you cannot expect that they have a formal training or capacity to offer a strong tourism experience. Somebody needs to tell them these things. They don't speak English in many cases. They don't know how to set up card payment, how to offer wireless to their guests, provide parking, enable toilet. These are not the things that they're thinking about. So they need a lot of guidance, but also the tourism industry needs a lot of guidance in terms of understanding the potential behind the agricultural product as a tourism experience. So just to give you some background, I work for USAID, United States Agency for International Development, which is sponsoring the project for tourism development in Bosnia and Herzegovina. So one of the things that we do is that we bring the tourism industry to the field, to meet the food producers, to show them what kind of experiences they can sell, and then we work with both sides to make sure that travelers, including wine tourists, can actually book this and come and spend half a day or so at a certain location. So there must be a lot of work done with the farmer.
Melanie, we had a conversation before, and you compared the situation here with farmers and agritourism with Tuscany. And basically, well, contrast rather than compare, because for you, Tuscany is a good example of where it works. Can you tell me why it's so much better in Tuscany than here? What's the difference?
Well, first of all, it's because they put the farmers in the middle of the program. In the center. Secondly, it's they didn't help them only with a financial aspect, but also to help them to design the farm and to help them with the architecture, to help them with the business model. And that's our role as a politician, is not only to help them to finance the model, but to help them to make it work. So I think that's why we are a little bit late in France. It's because we need to have a global program and not only a financial program.
Yeah, it's strange in a way, isn't it? Because the branding of France is so much about it's and it's rural, amazing, and it's wine and all that stuff. When you think of France, that's what you think about, and yet that is not. Still not. I mean, are we talking about the whole of France or just Occitanie? Do you think here? By the way, are there areas of France that are doing it well?
I think it's the case for all France, but I know that some area do a really good job, like Brittany, for example. But no, it's a general.
And you're saying that politicians should be helping this situation. So what are you doing now? What's happening now? How are we helping for this area to catch up with Tuscany and other areas?
Well, as I said before, we first of all put all the actors around the table.
Right.
And then secondly, we finance farmers which develop model by welcoming tourism. And we are looking also to work with architectures to make the farm very welcoming for tourism. So we think in a large aspect.
Feja, you could argue that in some ways Bosnia, and forgive me if I'm wrong, but Bosnia, and I've been to Bosnia and Herzegovina, but it's a relatively young country in terms of tourism. Agritourism could actually be one of the defining features of tourism to Bosnia, couldn't it? This is, in a way, a great opportunity, right?
So exactly, I see us as a culinary destination, and it is a new emerging tourism destination. I can test this easily. How many of you have been to Bosnia and Herzegovina? I'll say 3%, not even 3%. Well, there's not 100 people in the room. And
this is a well-traveled audience, to be fair. It's an unusual audience.
And, in terms of developing the tourism in our country, we're never going to be a mass tourism destination. We don't want to be a mass tourism destination. We take pride in the nature that we have, which connects well with the adventure product that we are sort of developing. We have a rich cultural heritage. To give you an anecdote, a friend of mine from my childhood, when I told him I'm going to be speaking in France about winemaking in Bosnia and the agritourism, he laughed at me and he said, most French don't even think there is winemaking in Bosnia and they don't know about it. And it's true, and we need to do a lot to promote it. But in terms of promotion that we are going to do for the country as a destination, this is exactly the area that we want to showcase. So food and gastrotourism and wine tourism, we see our chance there. It's sort of small destination where you come to experience, to meet people. My dear friend Dragana this morning said people will hug you when you get there, and you will be surprised with the richness of the offer of the destination. But I think you will most easily connect with the food experience, because that's so common to everyone. No matter where you come from, you will be able to just jump in and experience the culture through food.
And surely the missing link as well here is local hotels, local restaurants showcasing the food, the wine, whatever, from their local region. Is that happening enough, or could that be improved as well, do you think? Melanie, either of you. Melanie, go on.
Yeah, it starts to improve already, but we need to make more effort for making a link between farm and restaurants and events. But it's also a logistic problem, because the restaurant has to go to one farm for this kind of product and another farm for this kind of product. So we also have to develop logistic platform for helping the restaurant and all the tourism key players to make business with farmers.
Improve the distribution network, all that, and integrate everything together. Sorry, Fedja, last word on that?
Same here. I mean, there are some great examples, but they are still just the examples. It's not a common sort of approach, and some hotels really take the extra effort to put a small display on the table and say, this is the cheese from so and so, or this is the local honey, or this is the local jam, or try this juice, or try this rakia, or try this wine. But so much more can be done, because when I travel, I try to immerse with every new destination, and I don't want to be eating Bosnian food when I go to France. I can find it, but it's not something I'm, eager to eat. And I feel that most of the tourists want to do the same. There is some uncertainty in terms of, food safety. When you go to a new destination, you're somewhat concerned if you're going to get some food poisoning, if you're not sure where you're buying food. But I think, at the level of hotels and at the level of local restaurants, you should be prioritizing local food, and you should be making an extra effort to promote it. So we have some good examples. By the way, there are some brochures that I was not allowed to bring in. But when you leave the room, you feel free to grab this wine route brochure or the small blue brochure that we also mentioned this morning to learn more about these examples.
Thank you. I think this is a fascinating subject. I think there's so much, as I said before, so much potential here, and I hope that you both get through the obstacles that are there, that are preventing you from proceeding. But,
just maybe one more point, because I talked a lot about farmers, but also agritourism is a good way to learn how to slow down as tourism. I don't know if you saw the movie La Gloire de mon Père in France. I don't know what's the title in English, but it's about a movie 50 years ago where a family stay in a farm, in a house for months, and I think agritourism help you to slow down and to stay in one place for months and to discover the way of life and to learn how to make small pleasure in life. So I think it's a very good way.
If I can close on the same sort of example, we have a slow food movement in Bosnia, which we picked up from Italy, and Bosnians and Herzegovinians, of course, loved it, and our tourists love it because it really gives you a chance to just experience what a normal everyday life with a Bosnian family is. So we've supported the trails of honey and trails of cheese in Trebinje region in the southern part of Bosnia and Herzegovina. And we are getting wonderful reactions from the guests. In this case, the travel agency is facilitating this linkage. But just like Melanie said, to experience the slow type of life that we are all, I got up at 6 a.m. this morning. I'm sure everyone here doesn't get enough sleep. And we usually grab some food like on the go. And with these families that we sort of try to put in the forefront of tourism product, we show you how they live on a daily basis. We show you how much time they take to prepare food, how much time they take to enjoy food, and then they explain you how they make this food and how their everyday life looks like. And I think there's great potential in promoting this as a great tourism experience and a tourism product for a small country such as Bosnia and Herzegovina. Thank you.
And improving the quality of our own lives while we do it. Absolutely. Can you put your hand together, please, for Melanie and Feja? Thank you. Okay, is Michelle here, Julia, who is chairing the next session? No? Let me just find out. Hold on there. Let's have a tea break. Okay, everyone, Michelle's on his way, so we're going to have a quick break now for 10 minutes until he comes. So there's a coffee break. We're going to have one anyway. Let's have it now. It's community involvement engagement. He's straight afterwards. He's up after. This will be about 25 minutes. Into about half an hour from now, yeah. Hopefully not. Let's get you on board. Everyone, half of you are here, the other half are still having coffee and enjoying Bosnian produce produced by Feja. But anyway, they will come in. I want to welcome you back. This is the last session this afternoon now. We have got a brilliant 2 or 3 sessions, in fact, coming up, which look at different aspects of sustainability in travel and tourism. And I want to now bring on to stage Michel Durieux, who is the CEO International of Huftopia and Special Advisor UNWTO. And you're going to chair a discussion about community involvement and engagement. It says it right up there. Thank you, Michel.
Hello. Hello. I'm going to call Sabina Saman, Deputy Minister, Tourism of and Environment Federation of Bosnia. We'll call Kim Bosch, Vice President, Global Tourism Innovation Hub, MasterCard. Nadine Pinto, Global Sustainability Manager of the Travel Corporation. And I think that we miss the Minister of Culture and Tourism of Moldova. Oh, you are here, yeah. We were afraid not to see you, so it's real good news to have all together here. Well, we are going to speak about community engagement versus involvement, and I think it's a very important subject in our tourism sector, because we know that we have to rethink tourism, and clearly where is going tourism, how it impacts people, and people are in the center of our strategies, and clearly we have to ensure the proximity and the well-being of the population. Clearly, I will ask you first your definition of involvement and engagement, because I'm not sure that we have the same definition. Sergi, if you want, I'll lead you first with Moldavia.
Thank you very much, Michel. Près de tout, je veux vous remercier pour cette occasion de parler un peu en français, ici en France, et de participer à ce panel. Et car nous sommes en France, I will switch to English. First of all, you are right. It's very difficult to define this involvement versus engagement. As about Moldova, you know, I was impressed today to hear about Caribbean region, which rebuild the tourism after COVID-19 pandemic, 120%. I can say that Moldova rebuilt tourism very quickly, and maybe 300%, because when this pandemic stopped, the war in Ukraine began. So we have had more than 100,000 refugees fled the war through the Republic of Moldova during 1 or 2 weeks. And if they go farther to Europe, they have been in Moldova at least 1 or 2 weeks. And we don't make refugees camps. We open our homes and involve all local communities to host these refugees. So it's, I can say that there is an other kind of tourism now. And of course, if we speak about sustainability, we must understand that first of all, we need a sustainable peace to build a sustainable tourism. Thank you.
Sabine, you support environmental engineering and research, and in Bosnia you built a specific sustainable tourism and structure. Please, how you work on it?
Okay, if I can just to follow the discussion of my colleagues, and also we had, I think, 2 years ago, the migrant crisis, and in the north part of our country, it is you haven't heard for that. It is one part of country where we have that river. It's Una, unique. It's the name of unique one, Una. It is the most beautiful river, and the people in that part of the country were really exhausted of migrants, and it was a big pressure on them now. But after that, they had a very good results when it was over, and local community was involved too. And when was it over, then we had an increase in the tourism, which is unbelievable. I just wanted to say it. Regarding your question about the involvement and engagement, for my opinion, involvement is a passive action. When you involve the people, local community, for example, to be known about the information, to have all the information, can decide about something, to have the access to the information. For example, when we work on the strategy, we involve all our levels of our governance. We have 4 levels of governments. We have many ministers. We have maybe the most ministers per capita in the world. And everything else, and local community, and even after that, there's somebody that were angry on us about they were not involved enough. And when we, for example, when we make a national park, and in that part of the country, we have that national park. It is the most beautiful national park on that river Una. And also we involved the local community, and it is the involvement. But when you have the engagement, it means that they are really actively engaged. For example, I have one example that we had via Dinarica one project where we put the paths during on the mountains, and for example, there is one grandmother who is living near that path. During the industry period, her children went from her. She was alone. Then, when the industrial period ended, when our industry was devastating, then the children start to come back to grandmother. It is a social aspect of that, and they started to make the products that Feja mentioned, and to make one ethno village, etc. It is a real engagement.
Thank you very much. I'm going to speak now with MasterCard. It's not usual to speak about engagement and involvement with MasterCard. Usually we speak about more data and financial. But clearly, Kim, you are leading the MasterCard Tourism Innovation Hub, which purpose is developing tourism around the world in more sustainable, inclusive way. Could you explain us how you work as MasterCard in this objective?
Yes. Well, for us in MasterCard, we believe that traveling and tourism is one of the best ways of building a better society. No, I think it's related with what they were saying before. No, and for this reason we have created the Tourism Innovation Hub. Okay, because first of all we want to support the destinations to accelerate the recovery and develop the industry, but we consider that we have to do in another way, not like we were doing before in general, okay, which is a model that provides a lot of success in many countries and many destinations, but now it's time to do it in a more sustainable and inclusive way. And MasterCard has decided to engage, being the first, well, not the first, but engaging since the beginning, investing, and what we have created is a hub where we put together our resources, our capabilities in terms of innovation, digitalization, data, marketing, promotion, cyber, etc., in order to support the destinations to innovate.
But how are you involving the population in the country?
Well, what we are doing is defining projects and initiatives per each destination, depending on what they need. For example, in Costa Rica, I will try to be short because it's a very huge project, okay? But in Costa Rica, we have developed a program where what we are doing is we have implemented a prepaid card, which every tourist, when arrive to the airport, they can print the prepaid card. This prepaid card has an app which allow the tourist control the spending, the cash, the money in the card, but also control the CO2 emissions that they are doing accordingly to the spend that they do with the card.
We see that you still have financial part and data information.
Yes, but also sustainable. The most important thing is not the financial, is not the sustainable. The important thing is that we are engaging the tourist with the local programs because they can compensate or their footprint in real time, the same day, before going to sleep, I can donate to compensate the CO2 I have generated in Costa Rica. So it's just an example of projects that we are leading and investing.
We are going to do our travel with Nadine Pinto, Global Sustainability Manager, as I said. And clearly you have worked with your foundation in programs in South Africa and Latin America. Could you tell us how it works really?
Absolutely, yes. So the Tread Right Foundation is the not-for-profit arm of the Travel Corporation. The Travel Corporation is a group of 40 travel brands that operate in around 70 destinations. So in 2008, we opened the foundation, and we don't receive any money from our guests directly. We just take some revenue from our brands and invest it into the foundation, which then invests it into these sustainable tourism projects. So I'm just going to touch briefly on two that are close to my heart and that you mentioned in Latin America and South Africa. So in Latin America, we go to a Weavers Community Center. This is in Chinchero, Peru. And it was basically the idea of the community where, due to globalization, a lot of the younger generation was moving out, but there was a traditional way of weaving that these elders in Chinchero wanted to preserve and keep going. And so Nilda, she's the manager at the center, she wanted to create this community where the elders could teach the youngers, as well as tourists, how to do their traditional weaving. And the proceeds from this community center would go directly back into the community. So it goes towards their education, it goes towards healthcare, and Nilda is responsible for that on her own. So we have been donating money towards supporting this organization to purchase the textiles and the things that they use, and then they sell it to tourists or they sell it to locals. We do send some of our brands who are traveling through Peru through this community center. So there is a constant source of income because our guests are always purchasing from the community. So it's a great example of sustainable tourism and it actually benefiting the community. The other one is in South Africa, and there's many projects, but in South Africa, our founders are South African. They're a South African family, very passionate about wildlife tourism, and so we support Wilderness Foundation Africa in saving rhinos, because as we know, rhinos are endangered and at risk. So we support community-based anti-poaching initiatives that are all community-based. They run the projects, they run the planes, I guess, that go above and kind of monitor the rhino behavior. and making sure that making sure that poaching doesn't happen. So that's another example of where we are supporting sustainable tourism, so that the rhinos can run free and wildlife tourism can thrive.
Thank you very much. I'm going back to Moldavia. You know that I have a special link with your country.
Yes, I know very much. Thank you very much.
I have a family very involved and engaged with Moldavia. But clearly, your country is the country of the origin of the wine. How do you organizing all the itineraries of wine, and how are you involving the population and the producers?
From my point of view, yeah, it's working?
It's working,
yeah. So wine consumption, agriculture, tourism, it's about people. And about people, it's about culture and heritage. So from my point of view, we can involve and engage local communities through cultural events and putting in the spot of attention for in our offer, touristical offer, our heritage and culture. Even during this year, difficult year, we have done many cultural events, especially a festival of classical music called Desk Opera in countryside. So it was 1 week of living in countryside with local people, communicating with people. Of course, good wine, of course, good food. But first of all, it's about culture. Maybe because I'm a minister of culture, but not only. I think culture and heritage must be put in the front of the table of sustainable tourism. Thank you.
I'm going to ask in Bosnia, what is the reaction of the population with tourism? It's a positive action, or as in other destinations, we start to have a negative impact of tourism?
Everybody in Bosnia expects a lot of tourism. It is the government always say that it is the moving force in the Bosnia, but they don't have. I'm the part of the government, and I know how we are fighting in our Ministry of Finance to give us the money for tourism.
We do the same in all the countries.
It is not so easy. Everybody talks about tourism, but and environment. It is connected to us, but it is very difficult to find the money for infrastructure, for the big projects, etc.
But when you are creating an offer in Bosnia, when you are looking for the future, how to transform tourism or to create the new structure of tourism, are you working with the population, with the destination?
If you ask me about the new wave in tourism, I'm always speaking about the sustainable, because I'm an environmental engineer, and yes, we speak with the community. We are looking for their opinions. We are listening to them. We are working with them on the terrain, and we hope that we will succeed in it.
Yes?
Sorry, I'll just add to that. The Travel Corporation has actually partnered with Bosnia and Herzegovina, and we've actually just launched a... sorry, is this working? Okay. We've actually just launched some new experiences that are happening in the south with some Bosnian experience providers. And so one is a fig cake tasting, I think, experience. And we've just had guests go through earlier this month, and they absolutely loved it. It was an opportunity for them to just talk to a Bosnian, which they hadn't had on the trip before. Otherwise, it was just museums and kind of sightseeing. But they really enjoyed that, like one-to-one time to be able to learn about the culture.
The other thing that they did was a soap making workshop, which I guess is like traditional to Bosnia as well. So our experience providers, our operations team are working directly with the experience providers to help train them on what's it like when tourists come through. They help them with the storytelling. They help them basically communicate to the guests why these things are important to the Bosnian people, which I think is really important because traditionally it's based on post-war tourism, but being able to highlight these positive stories and showcase these different stories that showcase the local culture, I think is really interesting. So I thought that would just want to add that.
Kim, a question. You have Bosnia and Moldavia. I don't think you work with them for the time being. What would be, yes? Yes? What are you doing with them? So.
Well, we are providing mainly with them and many destinations two kind of service. One is data service in order to know better the travelers and what are they doing, how are they spending and which are their behavior. But there's one thing I really love it and I think it's one of the projects we are doing with them is at the end in MasterCard we have near 3 billion card holders around the world. So at the end is a huge population of people who is spending and is traveling. We have a program which is Priceless program, which we are creating amazing experiences with the destinations, what we call Priceless experience or flagship experience. And they are experienced which we use for promoting special destinations and make these 3 billion card holders visit these countries and these destinations. And this is working in many destinations and it's working pretty well in terms of accelerating this recovery and engaging the tourists in these new destinations.
Last question to Moldavia. Are you communicating with the population for the new jobs, for education, for training in tourism sector?
Yes, of course. We are in the very beginning. So we have to explain, we have to training our people. And in this trip we are assisted and we have a lot of help from USAID, for example, which work with us and we plan to develop now many courses for both for tourism operators and for local people. We work a lot with local administrations because it's very important to involve them and after that to engage local people in these programs. Because we have no sea and mountains, but we have very creative people, and communication with these people is our offer, touristical offer. Because Moldova is a small country with a big heart. This is the slogan of our country, and it's a perfect place to try to find yourself in a countryside. So it's an amazing place to discover relation, to live in a house with the local people and to feel the life and to discover new society.
Nadine, last question. How we have to do a country to have the support of your foundation?
Good question.
Thank you.
We're really looking at up and coming destinations and where's the support required. We want to go where people want tourism. We don't want to just impose ourselves on a community, but it's a community that is open to tourism and wants to help develop themselves sustainably, I think is our requisite. And then, we do have an application form through our website, which is the Tread Right Foundation. And that's basically how we accept projects.
Thank you very much. I think we have just started a discussion on engagement and involvement. clearly, I really think that population, we have to put it in the center of our strategy, and we have to communicate much more with the population and the destination to really create a tourism with them. If not, they will be against tourism, and after we have to create a real economic model to be sure that the tourism is sustainable. This is not just environment, but this is the social part and the economy. Sabina,
Yes,
the
I
last
just
word.
wanted to add that there is no project if the local community that do not approve that and accept that. There is no project, and it will not be. It is the main.
I think this is the most important thing. We have to think about how to have the approval of the population and to make them really part of the project in the starting point. So when we are creating a product, it's important to ask them if they agreed, if they approved, because if not, we will have in the next future problems in the development of tourism. Thank you very much. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much, Michelle and panel. Again, I think every topic that we cover is really at the nub of what we're trying to talk about with sustainable tourism. And they're always too short. We always want them to be longer. It's a shame. Now then, skiing. Let me just give you some background before I introduce the guest. We're talking here about ski resorts, about man-made snow, leisure parks, and their impact on the environment. I just want to give you a couple of facts. According to the European Environment Agency, the length of snow seasons in the Northern Hemisphere has decreased by 5 days each decade since the 1970s, thus increasing the demand for the production of artificial snow. Some ski resorts use artificial snow to extend their ski seasons and guarantee snow for every day of the season. And there are now some resorts that fully rely on artificial snow. Now, the Alps has 35% of the world's ski resorts, correct me if I'm wrong, and around 120 million tourists come each year. And for a lot of them, it just basically is impossible to continue a ski area without creating artificial snow. But, and that's why we're here, there are environmental impacts to that. Snow cannons, for example, do have an impact. I'm sure you're going to discuss all this. But I'll just say one thing, which is that the CEO of Responsible Travel, Justin Francis, has actually recommended stopping ski holidays altogether, which is quite a drastic thing, but that's how extreme the argument can go. Now, we have with us Loïc Bonneul, who is the Chief Operating Officer of Compagnie des Alpes, who is now going to basically talk us through how his company is challenging this.
Hello, everybody. Thanks for giving me the opportunity to talk about those essential issues. Would it be possible to have a look at the slides, please? Thank you. And you've been launching the debate on a very appropriate way. I would like, just before to go into this debate, to give you an overview of what is Compagnie des Alpes. As some of you may know, Compagnie des Alpes has two activities. Half of our activity regards leisure parks. We've got Parc Astérix, and it's very special for me to be here in the Museum of Romanity when you manage Parc Astérix. And Futuroscope. And we have other leisure destinations in Belgium, Holland, and Austria. And the other part of our activity is ski resorts, and most of them are in the French Alps. We manage 10 ski resorts and both activities have about 10 million day visitors a year. So the debate around ski is the following one. I will mainly speak about ski here. We have actions and the same actions for leisure parks, but I think that all of you are more interested by listening to ski, as all of us know that climate change will impact this activity. So as ski is concerned, we are both victims and guilty. Victims because our activity rely on snow and cold, and we have all a sense that this is disappearing. The question is at which pace this is disappearing. And guilty because we are part of the problem, and some of us had clumsy behavior, like for example using helicopter to bring snow on slopes, which might not be a solution. Or you might heard about the debate right now about ski reservoirs, and especially in La Clusaz, with a lot of articles around that. So we'll speak about two subjects. First, the victim part, and then the guilty part. So for the victim part, what was very important to me when I joined Compagnie des Alpes 3 years ago was to understand properly at which pace climate change will impact our business. And I asked the team, what do we have around climate change? And they told me we have everything, and they show me curves with evolution in time of the limit between snow and rain. But with that, we were clueless about the consequences for our business. And a few engineers have been working on that on the past years with me, and they've built a model, amazing one, using Météo France data, and they've been modeling on using geographical information systems, and with two kinds of information. How will natural snow evolve? And do we have cold slots and enough water to produce, to have some snowmaking? And they did that up to the end of the century on all of our resorts in two scenarios. The first one is the scenario 4.5, which is plus 2 degrees at the end of the century, which we hope we will follow, but it is most probable right now that we will follow the other one, the 8.5 scenario, which will lead us to plus 4 degrees at the end of the century. And those teams came back to me with the kind of graphic you see behind me, and well, they have a lot of them, and so I just show you one of them. So you see a resort. It is Flaine, Morillon, Sixt, and you see our ski lifts, which are in black. And here you have the view on the season when it's green. It means you've got enough snow to ski during all the winter season. When it's orange or red, you don't have enough snow to ski during the season. And you see at some point in the middle of the orange, you've got some green. It means that you don't have enough natural snow, but if you can do some snowmaking, you have enough cold to make some snow and to have the slopes on. So that's for the year 2000. And they've been working on slots on ranges of year, 2020 to 2040, 2040 to 2060. And for all of those years, they've got probability, and they showed me what are the 2 worst years during this 20 years frame, what are the 4 worst years during this frame, and what is a medium year. So I'll show you how it evolves for the 2 worst years during those ranges. So that's the next slide. And you see how the green is disappearing during the century. So yes, our business will be disappearing, and the question is at what pace. And good for us at Compagnie des Alpes because we have very high resorts, and this is the lowest resorts we manage. Most of our resorts will have enough snow to be able to ski up to 2060. And then it becomes difficult, and even up to 2060, there are some of them for which it will be more and more difficult to ski during December. So if I have to sum up the consequences for us. First thing is that it's not that worse up to 2060, but still, we have to adapt. And we've got to take actions as well because we're guilty, and we'll come back to that. So I will show you some of the actions we take to adapt ourselves, since we are victims in some way. And to give you a very concrete example, this is what we did in Les Arcs last year. We've been replacing a ski lift by a gondola, and the difference is that with a ski lift, you need to have your skis on your foot when you come back to the bottom of the slope, so you need snow at the bottom of the slopes. And if there's not enough snow at 1,500 meters, you won't be able to have your clients go back to the ski resorts, to their hotels, etc. So we replace this ski lift by gondolas, which means that years where we won't have snow up to 1,500 meters, but we will have snow at 2,000, our clients will be able to go back. The other thing is that the beginner zone has been removed from the start of the gondola to the high end of the gondola. And this way, we in 20 years, in terms of climate change, will be able to operate those beginner zones 20 years more. And last but not least, we are completing the activities we suggest to the clients. For example, we did a museum at 2,000 at the high end of the gondola. And we have two chill zones in order to take advantage of the environment. And that's what we need to multiply, because snow won't be the only thing on which we can rely on our business later on. So that's for winter. And the other very important and very difficult thing is to diversify our activities on a bi-seasonal offers. So we need to develop activities for summer. Right now, our ski resorts are made for winter. There are countries like Australia where they have very nice resorts in summer as well. And climate change is something that will trigger issues for us as regards winter, but it's an opportunity for us in summertime. The way we think we need to move on summer is to think of ski resorts globally, and to make master plans of the resorts and try to think of activities that will be able to offer a different kind of experiences to families during at least 1 week. And we need to have capacities. The big difference between a ski resort and summer activities is that for ski, you can have a lot of capacity. For a lot of people, it's very easy. You have a few gondolas, and then you can have a million skiers in winter. And for summertime, each activity can bear about 20,000 people during the summer, so it's very low capacity. Those activities need to be developed in a way that are sustainable and that preserve the environment, because the environment is the raw material on which you rely for your clients. So at the moment, we are developing with local communities master plans on our resorts, and that's an example I took on Grand Massif, which is a resort on which you saw the modelization as on climate change beforehand. And we are developing activities too, guiding tour, and we bought last year Evolution 2 in order to gain expertise on summer activities. So that was for the victim part. Now let's go back to the guilty part. Since we are impacted by climate change, there is a huge focus on what we do in order to limit our footprint on the environment. Well, I was very surprised and well impressed when I arrived in Compagnie des Alpes 3 years ago, because I often see companies that have huge declaration on their commitments and sometimes very few proofs. And in Compagnie des Alpes, I saw the opposite. I saw a lot of local proofs, but very few global commitment for the company. let's take an example. I gave you some example on this slide, but one which is very representative is that we have biodiversity observatories in all of our ski resorts for years. And so every summer, we've got scientists that we pay, and that goes all around our ski resorts in order to measure biodiversity, which means that we know very precisely the hotspot of biodiversity on our resorts. And then when we have to build a new gondola, we know exactly where to put the pylons in order to minimize our impact. And one of the direct consequences is that when we are asking local authorities to have the authorization to replace a gondola, we have it very fast because all of that is documented, and we can argue why we decided, why we suggest to put a pylon here and not there. But those local proofs, if you want to commit everybody in the company, if you want to speak to your stakeholder, if you want to speak to your clients, you need to have a consistent and ambitions for your company. So we gathered all those local proofs and tried to see where we could go by 2030 and came back with those 3 commitments. So our corporate ambition is to be zero net carbon, scope 1 and 2 so far, by 2030, to be positive biodiversity by 2030, and to have 0 non-recycled waste by 2030. So far, we have no commitment on water, because I'm not able to say, knowing what I know about our use of water, if my impact is negative or positive on water. Because it's very regulated when you take water from rivers for snowmaking. So you do it when it's possible to do it, and then the water is on the mountain, and it comes back to the natural environment in spring when it melts. So those are the 3 objectives, and I would like to focus on 2 of them, zero net carbon and biodiversity, to show you the work in progress where we are. And well, all that we are building it. It's learning by doing. And on carbon, I'll show you 2 graphs. The one on the left is where we were 2 years ago when we came with this objective. And I think that in yellow you've got leisure parks, and in blue you've got ski areas. And when we gathered all the projects we had on local level, we knew that we would be able to come to zero net carbon by 2030, but that we needed to make more efforts. And then we took every items as far as emissions were concerned, and we asked our team, what can we do to decrease those emissions? And we came to the new path that is presented on the right. And you see that there is one big step that is made by 2024 on ski. It decreases a lot. That's because we've been replacing all the fuel we are using for grooming with recycled vegetable oil. So we do that next year. And so we are reducing by 60% our emissions on our ski resorts, scope 1 and 2, in 2 years from now. So by taking every item and by having discussions, looking at innovations on every item, it's possible to decrease rapidly our emissions. And at the end, we think that we will need to capture about 20% of our emissions, of the emissions we have now. And we built a partnership with the French National Office for Forestry, and we are beginning to invest from now on local carbon sequestration in order to offset the remaining carbon emission we'll have by 2030. So we are investing now to be able to benefit from this capture in 10 years from now. So that's for carbon. I will show you a very preliminary work we are doing on biodiversity. Well, when I talked at the beginning on biodiversity, people told me, well, carbon is easy because you can measure it. Biodiversity, you can't measure it, so we can't do anything. That's false. You can measure things, and you need to measure things if you want to have an impact. There are several items that have an impact on biodiversity, and the first one, as far as ski resorts are concerned, is artificialization. So what we did is that we tried to measure the artificialization of our resorts, and so we made up a scale, the one that you see below, and you know, 0 is full artificialization, that's when you have concrete with a pylon, and 1 is full non-artificialization. So by construction, this scale is false, but at least we have something, and we're discussing with the French Office for Biodiversity in order to have some this scale audited and be able to use it and to recognize it. The good thing with that is that now I'm able to put some kind of figure on the level of artificialization of my resort. And from this figure, I can discuss with each of my managers and ask them, what can you do in order to decrease your artificialization, and what kind of target can you commit on by 2013 time of desartificialization? And then you begin to talk with each of them, and they will tell you, yes, this, you know, you ride this route with your cars usually to go to this gondola. Maybe we don't need it. So maybe we can give it back to the nature. And this way, we can work on artificialization and biodiversity. Then my dream would be the next step to use as well the map of ecosystem on our resorts, which is on the right part, and to gather both information and to say artificialization has not the same impact depending on which ecosystem it is. So I'll go a step further and say I need to protect this ecosystem. This one is less rich in terms of biodiversity, so if I have to make a choice, it is the one where I need to have desartificialization. Well, so I gave you some example of zero net carbon and biodiversity. We have the same time of approach on recycled waste and on water management, and this is some kind of feeling I have on the level of maturity we have on each of the items. We're not perfect. Our approach are, we simplify things in our approach. We choose so far not to go to labels because there are so many labels, people don't understand anything about labels. You don't know if it's a mean or if it's a result that you're looking. And the first thing that counts for us is our results, and then we'll go to labels. We can have the debate, and I think labels have over interests, but first we wanted to concentrate on actions. So that's it, and what I learned for this is, first of all, raise our knowledge. Let's understand what is the impact on climate change. Stop just reading articles that say climate change is here, it's coming, no, we still have snow. Well, what objectively can we understand about climate change? Be consistent and try to reconcile your local initiatives with your corporate ambitions. Learn by doing, try things, and then you'll go a step further, accelerate, that's what we did on carbon, and take a long stand, and that's my belief on diversification for summer. You need to invest for the long term, and in the short run, it won't be profitable, but in the long run, it will be.
Loic, thank you very much indeed. Thank you. So there is life yet in the skiing industry.
Yes.
Okay, very good, thank you. We're now coming to the last session before the roundtable, and to introduce that, which is about risk, which is a very serious issue which not enough companies are working towards or thinking about. But can I bring, where is Ramsey? Is he here to, yes, there he is, to introduce this panel. Ramsey, all yours.
Hello. Here we are. It's a pleasure to be here, and also a salute to all of those who are watching online. I'm calling on all the way from London and the previous session, Nadine Pinto. If you can join us, please. And all the way from the USA, Scott Hume. Nadine has been introduced, and I'm going to introduce her as such now because I really want to talk business in a minute. 40 companies, a group of 40 companies. These people are sending people in all directions all over the globe, right? Yeah. And yet you have a foundation, and that's very interesting. I'll come back to you in a minute, Nadine. And Scott. Scott is in the business of rescuing those who are going in all directions. And we're glad that you're here. They send people, and sometimes you have to rescue them. Sending people out in all directions. You're talking about 40 corporations. We know what companies are like. Companies usually are thinking sales. They're thinking income. They're thinking profit. Companies, that's the raison d'etre of companies. It seems to me that there is something a bit more strategic about thinking about sustainability, about having a foundation that's doing at least 60 projects on the ground in several continents. Can you tell us about the psyche of that strategic element? How does it work for business? Why is it good for a business to think that way?
Sure, absolutely. So obviously travel, we want to be mutually beneficial for the communities that we're traveling in as well as our travelers. And we started in 2008 with the formation of the Tread Right Foundation, and that was very close to our chairman's heart. I might have mentioned that it's a family-owned company, and so they're already very closely tied to wildlife, obviously coming from South Africa. So that's kind of where it came from, is we need to start thinking about giving back to the communities that we're actually operating in. And for 2008, that was very revolutionary for the travel industry. I'd say CSR, corporate sustainability, corporate social responsibility was a little bit further ahead in other industries. And for 2008, that was great, a great step for the Travel Corporation. And then we introduced our first sustainability strategy a few years later in 2013. And that really focused on how do we remove single-use plastics from our operations. The travel industry tends to look at sustainability on an issues basis. So it was single-use plastics and it was animal welfare. And then in 2019, when I joined the company, we started to look at carbon and climate change. And what would it really mean for a travel company at our scale to look at climate change and the risk it poses, and what we could be doing to mitigate and adapt to climate change. So it was definitely a foresight. Now it's very strategic because climate change is affecting our business. We do have river cruises that operate across Europe. And they could barely operate this summer, right? We had river levels that were like 5 centimeters and so on. So it's a really real risk to the business. And so it's something we decided to take on. In 2020, of course, we had the pandemic, but we still continued to launch our sustainability strategy when we didn't have any travelers on the ground, which I think was remarkable for the Travel Corporation. And it's something we continue to hold close to our heart. We're tackling issues such as over-tourism, climate change, diversity and inclusion, animal welfare. We continue with single-use plastics. So it's very strategic in the way that we are approaching sustainability at the Travel Corporation. We have measurable goals that we report on. We have impact reports to make sure that we can hold ourselves accountable. And it's all in line with where we see the company going in the future.
So you're sending people in all directions. Is there any one place you don't ever send people to?
I would say, probably the areas that are close to tourism, North Korea, that sort of thing. But otherwise, we operate in 70 destinations, so I guess it's not a whole lot of countries on the
How many people do you send to Antarctica?
Not very many, like 10 maybe on a year.
Scott, have you saved anyone out of Antarctica?
Not for my brands, he hasn't.
No, we have not saved any of her travelers in Antarctica, but yes, we have addressed travel crises in Antarctica.
Have you ever thought, what the hell was he thinking? Or what the hell was she thinking going to that specific place, doing that thing that is called travel?
So, so for the audience, so you introduced me, but I'd like to introduce my company. Just briefly, it's called Global Rescue.
Go ahead, Scott. That was coming anyway, but go ahead.
But our business is travel risk and crisis management. So those are the services we provide. So to answer your question directly, do I think, what were they thinking? I think about that every day. Somebody challenges my thinking every day, and we're in the business of making travel happen. So we want people to go to where they want to go. They want to go to Nîmes. They want to go to Mount Everest. We want to make that happen, but in a safe way. Everybody has a great experience, and but yes, people they surprise me every day.
Head of operations at Global Rescue, and Global Rescue has paramedics, physicians, even military personnel, veterans who are able to go and save somebody or rescue somebody from a dangerous place, such as maybe climbing the Himalayas.
Yes, we've done over 150 evacuations this year from Mount Everest and the surrounding peaks.
How many destinations do you send people to that could be high risk and are assessed as such in terms of, let's say, adventure travel?
We don't do very much, actually. We only really have 1 or 2 adventure travel brands that will kind of go to really remote areas, such as the Himalayas or Antarctica, some places in Asia. But we have done risk assessments. For most of our trips, we have to do a risk assessment, on every trip to make sure that everything's okay. We do have a lot of older travelers with us as well. So just basic risk assessments happen on an annual basis for our trips.
Scott, risk assessment. Now, you would think that that is very logical. A travel agency is doing adventure travel, and they have all of these destinations that are a lot of fun and extremely adventurous, and probably if you achieve them, you're a hero kind of thing. Are they doing enough risk assessment for these places?
So, risk comes I think you can define it across a spectrum, and then there's different constituents on any risk model. So Nadine's company does risk assessments, but the traveler also is embracing some risk. So has the traveler done a risk assessment, and are they coordinated together? And then is there a second set of eyes that looks at some of this, which we think we fill a little bit of that void. We can assist companies that maybe don't have the staff. Sometimes risk assessments can be very resource intensive, time intensive, and some companies just don't have that level of staff to dedicate to full products or products like they'd like to have. And we add a second set of eyes, or we assist travelers who say, hey, I want to travel with Nadine, and this is what they tell us about the risk of this trip. What's your opinion of it? Or what's your opinion of it based on my personal medical needs? And so when we add an extra layer of expertise to this topic, we think that we're reducing risk for the company, for the traveler.
Now, when we talk risk assessment, most people think that this is something that governments need to do, for example. This is the job of a government or a job of the public sector. It seems to me from what you're saying, both of you, that that definitely is an issue that the government should worry about, the industry should worry about, but also what you're saying is that the individuals, the consumers themselves, need to worry about.
Right. So I don't want anybody to get the impression that we think there's a risk behind every tree, but if somebody's going to a destination they've never been to before, maybe it's good to ask somebody who's been there, hey, this is my personal situation. I'm going on a safari, a photo safari, but I have this certain medical condition. If I have an episode, how long does it take to get me out? What are the resources? What does that look like? And then we can help them better plan, help the travel agency better plan, or the travel provider, the Invent provider.
What about the idea of doing an audit on a location? So I'm only talking about locations that are obviously high risk, not the typical thing. Even safaris are no longer high risk. Most safaris, you're just expected to sit in a truck and see beautiful animals in their own environment, and it's pretty safe. But if you're going beyond this, if you're going beyond that, should there be a certain standard that we should look at? Let's say, just like there are red zones and orange zones and green zones, etc. Should there be a standard that is established in the industry for the risky places?
I don't want to say that there should be a particular standard, but there should be a standard that it should be done. And not every location needs a full audit. And I think we can narrow this down to even use fewer resources. Like you said, safaris are not new anymore, right? There's a lot of them going on. I think the industry has made it about as safe as you can make it, the safari part. But where we can assist, companies like mine can assist, is maybe we don't audit the safari, but we audit the medical infrastructure that supports the safari. So the first level of hospitals or clinics that would support a patient, for instance, or the next level of hospitals at a big city, or audit the aviation assets that support evacuation out of the field as a piece of, the safari might be safe, but it's the logistics getting somebody back that maybe nobody's looked at yet, and we can provide audits for that.
One thing I noticed about your projects, Nadine, is that you are communicating with the public. You even have a video series that is done, The Storytellers, that tells the story of real people, real situations, real places, real cultures, etc., and also from the point of view of sustainability. So you're putting effort in communicating to the public. So it's not all B2B and public sector versus private sector. Why are you doing that, and how effective is that?
That's right. So the Tread Right Foundation is really kind of viewed as a sustainable tourism kind of foundation. So while we have these sustainable tourism projects on the ground, we also want to be able to educate our travelers on what they can be doing before they leave for their destination, what they can be doing on trip, and when they come home to be more sustainable in their life. So we've had kind of what we developed and we call a Make Travel Matter checklist. And it's just a simple checklist that any traveler can use, and we give it to all our travelers before they come on any of our trips. So it reaches a good amount of people, and it just gives them simple tips like pack your reusable water bottle, or bring your reusable bag, or do some research on the culture that you're going to be visiting, so that you're not wearing inappropriate clothes, or know what may be an inappropriate thing to say. So we find it very important to educate the traveler, because we want the traveler in the destination to be acting as if it's their home, because it's someone else's home. So the Tread Right Foundation has really taken a lead on making that communication to our travelers. It is very well received, I would say. A lot of people, they don't necessarily book with us because they see us as sustainable, that they see us as responsible, but then when they're on trip, they're like, oh yeah, that makes sense that you're doing this, and oh, it's so great that you don't give us plastic water bottles. So it's not a selling feature at the moment for us to be sustainable, and I don't think travelers are looking for it just yet, but it is going to be something that is defining going forward. And then when they come on, when they come on the trip, it's a reason again for them to book with us again, because they like what we're doing and they like to support that aspect.
Okay, Scott, obviously you're B2C. Anybody can hire Global Rescue to protect them on a certain trip or at a certain destination, right? But you also do B2B. Can you tell us a little bit about that? The angle where you're trying to create a safety zone at the national level rather than at the personal level.
Sure. So, and thanks for that question. Much of our business is B2C, is right to the consumer, but we are frequently asked to provide the services that we've discussed already, but to an enterprise on behalf of all of their travelers. So we are integrated into their risk reduction program so that their travelers, who may not be doing fun things, like going on safaris or going on cruises, but they're actually going to work, but they work overseas or they work away from home, And so we're part of the risk reduction strategy, for enterprises on behalf of their travelers.
And what do you think of that? Is it when you... I know something about crisis management, and what I know is that if you're going to seek help after the crisis erupts, it's going to be much more expensive. And it may take a very long time. But if you have a crisis management system established, then chances are that crisis is not going to grow. Does that apply?
That definitely applies. So what I would, as an example, as you mentioned, if you're going to wait till the event happens, resources are going to be already spoken for, costs are going to be high, time is already against you. But if you have planned for this in advance, maybe you can avoid it in the first place, or you have people in the chain of command who are willing to make decisions quickly on your behalf. Resources are already planned for evacuation or extraction, and you've not only reduced your risk, but you've reduced the footprint and the resources you need to on behalf of your people, on behalf of your travelers.
Better safe than sorry. How many, you as a corporation, you're talking about hotels and ships and all kind of travel programs. What kind of risk management do you do in your own company?
Yeah, so we do, we ask those questions to all our suppliers where the high risk activities, whitewater rafting in Asia or something like that, do we have to bring in the cavalry when something goes wrong, or do you have a local emergency plan in place? It's always best that we always select local suppliers as opposed to like foreign suppliers if possible, because we know that they have the capacity in country to actually support with some of those emergencies should they happen. But yeah, overall, it's just, we do regular risk assessment across hotels, ships, and our trips just to make sure that we know what's going to happen. And then we also make sure that all our suppliers have the appropriate risk assessments completed and insurance possible if anything were to go wrong.
Well, I would love to end this with a story about a rescue, Scott. I'm very sorry.
Yes,
I know
cool
you didn't like to do,
stories.
but everybody here wants to hear about somebody who was saved out of the Himalayas or Antarctica or somewhere.
Brought back to life.
So can you just give us something like that so that we can enjoy the round table after this session?
Let me think. The best one ever. Well, I'll start with a few humorous anecdotes, and these aren't great rescues, but they are real-world scenarios. About once a year, does anybody know how giraffes defend themselves? They hit you with their head. So they take that long neck, and they swing their head around, and they hit their opponent. And so we have, probably once a year, we have somebody get knocked out by a giraffe in Africa. That they're on safari, and believe it or not, it is. And so this is a little risk assessment here. So anybody who's about to do the following activity, in Africa, in places where you go see giraffes, sometimes they have lodges, hotels, but you stay on the second story, so the giraffe can stick their head in, and everybody feels like that's a really safe thing, but you get too close to the giraffe, and that net can go in a long way. So I'm just, I'm warning you now. If you get knocked out by a giraffe, you'll probably see somebody like me in the near future. The most harrowing rescues that we do each year, and I don't know if this is what you're looking for, but
yeah, I want something
this is adventure travel. So this is more serious than that humorous anecdote, but. And I think it always impresses me that it leads into sustainability, risk. All the topics we've talked about today and numerous of these conferences is adventure travel, mountain climbing. So Mount Everest, the high peaks in Nepal, the high peaks in Pakistan. These are very dangerous places. Now, you have to be permitted to climb there to begin with. So there's some level of assessment for climbers to go there. You have to have a trekking company with you. They're experts. They have local expertise. You add all that together, and it's still dangerous, and And I'm not a doctor, so as Ramzi indicated, my previous career, believe it or not, I've started, as an aside, I started off life as an engineer, but I went into the U.S. military and I spent a career there, and so done some of these things, which is how I found my way to global rescue. But no matter how many times you've climbed a mountain like Mount Everest, you don't know how your body's going to react to that altitude the next time. So you may never have a problem with it, but you may climb it. You know, you had no problem last season, and this season you have a problem. You go right to the base camp and you have an altitude injury, and you need immediate evacuation. And immediate evacuation in Nepal, believe it or not, the infrastructure is actually pretty good for that. If the weather permits, we can get you down just like that. Have a helicopter on standby, go right to the base camp, and 2 or 3 hours after onset of symptoms, we can have you back down to a lower altitude. But if the weather comes in, it could be days potentially before a helicopter can get up to that altitude. So for when we get a call like that, which is during the climbing season, which is about the last 2 weeks of May every year, just 24 hours a day, we're really on standby and really anxious about the nature of the injuries we get there. Pakistan would be another country where, if you want to talk about very complex rescues, the high peaks in Pakistan are at the most austere part of the nation, up north in the Kashmir region. Very, very difficult to operate, and the distances, believe it or not, from the high peaks to assets that can support you are much, much greater than in Nepal. So it adds a level of aviation complexity, the weather complexity there. So those are the ones that keep me awake at night for during climbing season.
Well, just remember, if you're going there, you know who to call. And thank you so much, Scott, and thank you so much, Nadine. And I hand over to you, Rajan.
Thank you. Thank you, Ramzi. Nadine, don't go away. Stay behind after school. Okay, well done, everybody. We are now coming to the round table section, where we look at the day's proceedings and find out what people think they have learnt and gained from the day. And I am going to hand you now into the good hands of Duncan Parker, who is going to take over and lead the discussion.
Thanks very much, Rajan. And I'm very conscious that I'm the one thing that stands between everybody in here and a glass of wine. And hopefully everyone at home, you're about to get one too. It's very warm here in Nîmes, kind of almost warning us about global warming.